You know, I heard you. Greetings all.
All right, you've got 4:01 and you are live.
Okay, this is the June 1st meeting of the Community Advisory Board Review Committee. I'm Mark Drenick chairing, and I'm going to call the roll. Luke Murphy.
Here.
Dave Risberger.
Here.
Len Carson.
Here.
And we're joined by Katie Becker and Chris Witzenberg, Lieutenant Chris Witzenberg, Acting Chief of the Oneonta Police. Thank you all for all the work that you've been doing. We are closing in on things. I'll tell you that I don't believe I saw minutes, and if I did anybody else?
No, you wouldn't have.
No,
They
okay.
were attached to an incorrect email.
No worries at all. I hated to even bring it up, but for the fact that we'll look at two meetings worth of minutes next week. Okay, so we don't have any council members here, and so I'm going to dispense with how all that would work should we have had them. We're going to break this into two parts, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock. We're going to look at this Appendix 2, where we had been each tasked with creating essentially the 5th proposal. There are 4 presented in the Appendix 2, and we were going to take those, and we did take those, and formulated them with our own perspectives, and we'll look at those. When we do, we're going to need to do a lot of work, but in a short period of time, because what I'd like to do is see if we can be in agreement by the time we get to 5 o'clock. When Luke, you've invited Daniel Dreyer. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Pretty close, yeah, Dreyer.
Dreyer, okay. And we've invited David Mertzig to join us at 5 o'clock as well. And we'll be looking at number 1, the transparency and reporting and gathering information, a question that's still, in fact, the only recommendation at this point outside of a few that we had promised we'd come back to on the other side of the appendix discussion. Anyway, we'll be looking at them taking 3 minutes apiece to present either side of that issue, and a couple of minutes in rebuttal, and at which point it'll be our committee that will make the determination by majority vote. We've been unanimous throughout, which has been great. But our vote will be whatever the majority rules is what we're going to put then into the final Cabrc document. When we get done with that, if we can, I think we'll have time for it, is we're going to get to the final recommendations for review, which are all in section 4, which is civilian oversight and community involvement, A, B, and D. We said we would defer for final language on the other side of our determining what we're doing with the appendix proposals and the community advisory board question. After we're done with this, between meetings, I'm going to be sending the final draft language on the Cabrc to everybody. You'll all have that by the 4th of June in anticipation of our being able to make whatever modifications and then move into timelines the following week. I've had some conversation with the mayor around what our time frame should be given what I've just described. So we would have final recommendations, final language on those recommendations approved or modified and then approved at our next meeting. We'd also be going through timelines, and ideally we'd be able to assign timelines that make sense for these recommendations. That takes us to a place where I asked for a couple of days to clean it up, make it pretty, which is around, if we met again next week, that's June 8th. 2 days beyond that is June 10th, Thursday. My thought was that I would then provide that to the mayor and to Kerry, obviously, and we would get that to council. The mayor suggested we hold off and allow the CAB to be able to review the final document. And I presume that this committee is not going to have an issue with that, right? So that delays the time frame. Some give them a week to review, and if you don't mind, I guess what we'll do is take a week off and then come back and allow the CAB representative or representatives to weigh in on any issues that they might have with our final document. At that point, I think we should be able to wrap it up and send it off to council and then eventually for public comment. So we're looking at a bit of an expansion of the time frame. Carrie, you had actually sent me an email, I think I actually have it here, that puts it in at 7/6 for a public hearing. Is that right, Carrie?
Correct. Following the timeline that you had proposed with the final document coming to us by June 25,
Right.
that gives about 2 weeks for review, a week
All
to
right,
2 weeks.
thank you very much, Carrie. So I've outlined that, Dave, Len, and Luke, and if that sounds like the schedule we should follow or not, this is probably a good time to weigh in on that. Dave? Luke, sorry, Len, go ahead.
So when you say we're going to give our document back to the CAB committee, what are we looking for from them?
I think they'd like to have the opportunity to review the document. And I'm proud of the document. I'm proud of the work we've done. What I would do, just.
But it won't be the final, I'm sorry, Mark, but it won't be the final document. We still have to turn over this art document to the common council. This isn't a they
Correct.
accept or don't accept.
Well,
They're all going to have opinions.
They'd have the week to inform us of those opinions. What I would do, just to be expeditious of this, I'll be right with you, Dave, is I'll go through our 18 hours, I guess it is now, of archived footage and give them the timestamps on the discussions around various recommendations so they can go to that and see the level of and the quality of the discussion around those. Dave?
I think considering the level of work that the CAB had done on this project and looking at just historically with other groups that have met to come up with documents like this, I think it's just courtesy to give this back to them before it goes back to the council. I think if we're looking to try to build some as much consensus behind it as possible, confidence behind it as possible, I think this is the best thing to do. And I think that, I mean, ultimately it gets voted on by the council, but I think it's good to give this back to them. That way, if they have any questions, they have the opportunity ahead of time to say, okay, well, we recommended this, but you did this. Why? And have that conversation before it goes to the council where, there's going to be a lot of other input besides the CAB. I think it just puts them foremost in front of us first. I think I'm just looking at this as it's the respectful thing to do.
Look, I agree, Dave. I was just wondering, how much time will we afford the back and forth discussions about each individual?
Yeah, I understand, Len. I think we give a timeline. I think I'm looking at this as we have a recommended time frame to get this back to the council. But if we got to bump it a week, where we give them a week to review it, and then if they really have a lot of questions, we set up the next meeting where we meet with them and give them the explanations of why we decided what we wanted. Set up a 30 minutes or an hour meeting, and that's it. And then we can meet afterwards. And if there's something that we feel that we want to change, we change it, vote, send it onto the council. But yeah, I agree, Len. I don't think it should be dragged out. But I looked at it as there's nothing harmful in taking their input afterwards. And if we all feel like we need to have another discussion, we have that discussion. And if it's delayed another 2 weeks to the council, I'm okay with that.
All right. So again, before I go to you, Luke, so the mayor and I went through the timeline on it. He's perfectly comfortable with the timeline on it. I've as we've been doing this, I think it's like maybe the 8th or 9th time we've gotten together. It's a long time that we've been doing it, but I have been pretty regimented about, the process. And so I'm saying 1 week. And I am saying as well, we take a week off. This committee comes back and we listen to whatever thoughts that they do have on it. Might not be a full hour or 2 hours meeting, might be shorter than that. But let's hear what their thoughts are to give them the respect of being able to provide that input. And then it goes off to council. Go ahead, Dave.
Just one other point that I should bring up. If we're planning on having the public hearing on July 6th, which that's fine,
Mhm.
I will not be in town for that meeting.
Mhm.
And the mayor suggested I try to Zoom in, but that'll be pretty impossible where I'm going to be.
Yeah.
So
So this is being recorded, but I guess I can't say take me with you. Huh?
well, I would prefer to be here, but these plans were made months ago, and
Yeah,
I can't change them.
it's all understandable. Nonetheless, I feel like we aim for the date. I don't think it's asking a lot more of this committee. We're going to be doing one more meeting next week where we go through timelines. If we can get everything done I just talked about here in today's agenda. We'll go through timelines and we'll go through final language, and then I'll make it pretty, and then we'll hand it off to the CAB, give them basically a week, maybe 8 days to look at it, and then we'll schedule them to be able to have a conversation with us. Again, I'll timestamp every bit of archived meeting that we've got that references a particular recommendation, and that'll make it easier for them to understand the process, and I think that'll go a long way as well. Luke, you've been trying to say something, I think, a couple of times.
Yeah, just I think this is the right course of action to take. As long as we've spent on it, CAB spent many months doing this. It is a community-centered project, and I think, as Dave said, I think it only benefits us to have their input and their buy-in before it goes to council.
All right, then with that, should we vote on it, or does it require that? Can I just simply get a consensus that we're going to work essentially in that time schedule, and we'll have this hopefully presentable to Kerry to disseminate for the 7/6 public hearing?
I don't think we necessarily need a vote on that.
Okay. So
I'm
then
for it.
that's great. Then that's what we're going to do. All right. And it is a tight agenda, so I'm just going to push forward now if I could. As far as these proposals are concerned, thank you very much. It's a weird thing to be assigning homework, but it was great to see all of it well thought out, which you'd expect it would be. So what I'd like to do is just starting with the ward first. Luke, we'll just roll through. I'm going to have you present your proposal and answer any questions that are clarifying questions. This is not the moment to pitch the proposal. We're going to go through that. We'll present all 4 proposals, and then we'll have a discussion where we can kind of stake out territory for our own visions or see what we can do about finding compromise. Ultimately, I want to see if we can come up with a plan that we can provide as our proposal, number 5, essentially, to the council. And Katie and Lieutenant, if we need you within the course of conversation, we're going to reach out to you as resources, but we're going to obviously, in this particular case, this is kind of a committee conversation, and that's pretty much what's going to happen here. So with that, I'd like to ask, and you can share your screen. I think you've got that privilege, right, Carrie?
They do, yes.
Okay, so you can share your screen if you want, or just read it through, or however you want to present. But let's do that, and then we'll answer any clarifying questions. Then we'll move on to Dave Risberger's and so forth. Okay, sound good?
Sure. If you don't mind, I don't mind reading it just to save myself and the community embarrassment of my typos. So I'm happy to read it out. The City of Oneonta will establish a standing citizen advisory board that will be assigned the following duties. A, hear and respond to complaints and concerns levied against OPD within their legal ability to do so. B, analyze and synthesize statistics on crime, poverty, and drug use within the City of Oneonta. Additionally, this board will survey the community periodically to develop a broader understanding of community trends regarding policing. This board will compile an annual report as they do and other commissions for the city. C, the report to Common Council and OPD on findings of any complaints. D, work with the acting chief's panel on community solutions, work and support that panel. Let's see what other. E, send and receive board liaisons to the panel of community solutions. And F, have a representative involved with the consultation process of hiring new police officers.
Great. Any questions for Luke?
Luke, did you send that out to us?
I did. My mind was racing after the meeting, so I sent it out the day we had our meeting. So about a week ago, I sent it out.
Oh,
I
okay.
sent it out about a week ago.
All right.
All right, so I have a question, Luke, and it's I think it's maybe obvious, but I just want to be certain. So you're suggesting when you say establish a standing citizen advisory board, you mean as per the Public Works Committee and the plan? So it'd be a city board that would be, Dave. Is that a charter?
They're boards or commissions. Committees are usually council members only.
Right.
That's a small point, but it'll add confusion if we're calling it a committee.
Yeah, I was thinking more of the commission, similar to Human Rights Commission. There could potentially be a city council liaison, but this would be chaired and board by community members, or chaired and filled with, composed of. That's the word.
Anybody else have a question for Luke? Okay, great. Thank you. Dave, you're up.
Sure. Okay. So what I was thinking was a commission or a board, the purpose of which is to provide the citizens of the city of Oneonta an avenue to express their thoughts, concerns for the Oneonta Police Department, and to provide suggestions for policy improvements. But the suggestions should really be going to the city administrator, the mayor, and the council. And whether that's a committee on the council or the council as a whole, I think can be to be determined, because council committees change every few years, and they may completely change the names and the purposes. The duties would be to hear complaints, issues, concerns regarding the policies or the function of OPD, review any complaints filed against the OPD, and provides recommendations to the city administrator, the mayor, and the common council. This board would not have any legal authority, but reviewing the complaints, and if we need to, they can keep the officers' names redacted off the reports. I'm sure there's a lot of little nitty-gritty things that we'd have to work out. Board representative or a board representative will provide input or an opinion in the hiring of the chief of police when that occurs, and I know that does not occur that often. And take part in the interview process. That doesn't necessarily mean that they would have a vote in it, because that would come back to the common council. And then collect and analyze police data, police activity data. And the examples I was giving were arrests or tickets, to try to understand the local demographic trends and provide policy recommendations to the city administrator, mayor, and council, with the purpose of working to have a positive impact on those trends. I think that I don't expect, when I was looking online at other cities that have advisory boards like this, like the city of Rochester is a good example, and they're kind of on the forefront of what they're trying to do. But they also have a significant number of complaints that are filed, where I don't see that the number of complaints that we have in Oneonta is necessarily going to be high or enough for this group to have work to do with a complaint every single month necessarily. That being said, I really don't know either, because we don't know how many complaints. And then as far as the formation of the board, this would be appointed by the mayor, approved by the council. I was looking at 5 members with 3-year terms, but that's my opinion on that, I'm not set in stone with the numbers on that, because we've got boards and commissions that have 7 members, some that have 5, some that have 3-year terms, some that have 5-year terms. So I'm not stuck on that. But as far as working with the solutions board, I do have some questions with that. I think working with that is sure, it's a good thing. But did we actually have that solutions board in our recommendations of being formed with the purpose of it and so on, like what the purpose and the duties are? Because I think that board, if we're going to have that, I think that really should be something that's driven through the council ultimately, maybe even put in the charter. I don't know, we can decide on that. But if it's through the council, then it gives it more staying power, more authority. I think what the chief, what the lieutenant has started with that, and the ideas he's put behind that are very good. But I think it should ultimately come through the government body, so it has staying power. Because Lieutenant Witzenberg knows that over time people come and go, and we want to make sure that something like that stays around. So how that interacts with my idea, my opinion of a board, I haven't really formulated that just yet, but I figured we could discuss that.
Any, I'm sorry, Luke.
I was just going to say, I believe, Dave, that we all did agree to supporting that at some point in time. I don't remember if it was formally put down, but formally kind of enshrining the panel on community solutions.
Well, I think I know that we talked about it. We all like the idea. I don't know that we put it in the draft language.
That's fair. That's fair.
And I think it should be, if we're going to do that. Sorry to bring that up now and add more work.
So Chief, I'm going to take a quick question from you, but I'm just going to land back on that statement I made earlier on about I'm going to want to try to keep our proposals discussion within this quartet. However, go ahead, Chief.
This is really quick, and that is, we're working with county agencies on this, so that might be something to approach the county on. That's all I wanted to say.
Very good, thank you, Chief.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's something that would have to be done. I think that starting it with the council would also give it more impact and more authority behind it to actually make sure that we get the regular buy-in with all these other groups that the lieutenant has set up, and that it'll just make the group even stronger.
Any other questions for Dave? Okay, Len, you're up.
Mark, did you just want me to read it, or everybody was provided it?
If it's 3 paragraphs, so if you don't mind reading it, so that we have it in our heads as you're and can ask those questions, if you don't mind. Len.
Proposal: the formation of a new committee to hear concerns, complaints, and suggestions on policing within the city of Oneonta. Membership consists of 3 to 5 residents who will have at least 3 years of residency within the city limits, along with a representative of OPD. Meetings will be held quarterly, of which the committee will review any concerns, complaints, or suggestions filed during the previous quarter. From the city website, the general public will have the freedom to submit their concerns, complaints, or suggestions with the OPD directly to this committee. The findings and conclusions formed by the review of the committee will be organized into a report and submitted with the city personnel director, who will review and assure the recommendations are all within the New York State applicable rules, guidelines, and laws. Oversight will be provided by the Standing Committee of Finance and Human Resource Committee, as a biannual report will be provided by the city personnel director for review. But also, if disciplinary action toward an employee is required, will move forward on by this committee. A biannual survey will be performed by this committee, consisting of questions that relate to the community concerns past and present. The results should provide statistical data on whether the department policing and procedures implemented are working in the best interest of the community at large. The chairman of the newly formed committee will also sit on the community solutions panel. thus providing transparency and understanding of concerns, issues, and suggestions in regards to policing in the city of Oneonta.
Terrific. Go ahead, Luke.
Len, I'd like to say, especially towards the end, I think, and I had something similar in my proposal, that kind of synthesis, or at least that close cooperation with members between this whatever we're establishing here and the panel on community relations. I think that's important.
Thank you.
Len, go ahead, Dave.
So far, the only question I have, I mean, I know we'll get into this later with all of ours, but why were you suggesting 3 years residency? Because we don't necessarily do that with any other committee that we have in the city.
Yeah, residency is kind of a relative term, and I think in listening to some of the suggestions that were brought forward during common council meetings, I think it was Bill Shue in particular was referring to the residency of whether or not committee members were. Sorry about that. You guys still hear me?
Dog agrees.
The doorbell. Sorry about that. About residency and whether they were actual residents or not. So I just put in an arbitrary number just to kind of make sure that they were folks that were planted in our community, that had our community needs.
Okay.
Len, I've got a question similar to the one that I had asked Luke. So this committee, is it, in your mind's eye, is this like a commission? Is this, or is this, how is it institutionalized?
Again, Dave is spot on through the charter with regards to the actual title. I just used the word committee just so that we had fluid through our discussions, because that's what we were referring to as, but obviously we would have to fall in line with the city charter.
I may be the only one that cringes whenever I hear committee. Well, the bottom line, that question about it becoming institutionalized, so that we're not dependent upon, how engaged.
Again, to Dave's point and yours, both are correct in that this basically I view as a subcommittee of the Community Solutions Panel, which Dave is correct. We need to finalize that and then get it through council. And if the council as a whole approves it, then we can get it into the city charter so that it's a standing committee. Because without having it in there, it's not going to be a standing committee. It will always be considered an ad hoc, at which time somebody can remove it. So I think for longevity purposes of transparency between the community and the police, we need to have a standing committee.
Any other questions for Len? Dave?
It's not a suggestion, but I just had a thought. This may be throwing a massive wrench in here, but we used to have a public safety committee, which was the entire council, and the way it was set up seemed kind of ridiculous because it would happen in the middle of a council meeting, and basically the hammer would go to one of the council members from the mayor, and they would open the meeting for the public safety committee, and then you'd have the police chief speak, and Len knows this. You have the police chief speak, and then you have the fire chief speak, and then you close the meeting after the questions, after they give the report. But, and it came from my thought of any standing committee of the council can change every 2 years or 4 years, basically anytime the mayor changes. And to have it in the charter that this group, whatever we decide on, answers to a specific committee of the council could end up being problematic. But we could have it talk, and it might be better, and this is just my opinion, of course, but it might be better that they present, when they present, to the entire council. And if we reestablish the public safety committee, that would make most sense, that would be the time for them to talk to the council about whatever is going on with their commission. Yeah, I did it now.
I would entertain revisiting or revitalizing the public committee.
Okay. All right. Any other questions for Lynn? All right. Carrie, I'm just going to grab that chart and then I'm going to roll through mine. Oh, that worked out nice. Okay. So I'm thinking more in terms of collaborative, which is kind of typical. But what I'm looking at specifically is a police and community committee, or it could be a reiteration, establishment of the committee we were just talking about, commission we were just talking about, that would basically be there to provide resources and direction to these three subcommittees. I'm calling panel because I want to slide the community solutions panel into that collection. And then they would entertain reports and concerns that might be presented by these three panels. They'd create and vote on whatever motions, they report and take that to Common Council, obviously, to make the decisions. Meetings, I've been told that I might be a little bit aggressive about this, so maybe you want to cut the time frame or multiply the time frame by whatever number makes sense. But my sense of it is that they meet with the representative of each one of these three panels regularly. And in that way, they have a flow of information back and forth. And as far as the panels are concerned, the Community Solutions panel already exists. And I think I've provided a reasonable sense of what their mission is, which is to provide a monthly report to this policing community committee, we'll call it for now. And they would identify issues and propose solutions, which is what they're doing in the creation of a more needs encompassing and collaborative approach to the protection of Oneonta citizens. And they would request data collection and data-driven insight from a second panel that I'm calling the Research and Documentation panel. And then they would look to determine ways that they can engage people, essentially through networking, because this is a good group that the lieutenants put together with some, they've got some muscle, create more avenues of communication, education, transparency, and benefit the members of the community whose either economic disparity, homelessness, or chemical dependence, or other challenges have given them something of a susceptibility to bad decision making, understandably. Supporting OPD and its continued embrace of forward-sighted policies, procedures, and support OPD in training and recruitment. As a same story that they would meet once per month, and then they would wind up attending with a representative, the Policing Community Committee. The second panel is the Research and Documentation panel, which is essentially, it's a smaller panel, I would imagine, and it is one comprised of people who are academic professionals and residents that have an investigative bent and proficiency, and they would again provide a monthly report to the Police Community Committee. And then they would also send a representative to sit on that meeting that happens with the Policing Community Committee. They would design surveys and engage in data collection in support of the Community Solutions panel, and also in support of the what I'm calling the Policing Community Dialogue panel. They would also meet similarly. The subcommittee number 3, the panel number 3, is what I propose is that it's 7 city residents by mayor's appointment, and they would provide, again, a monthly report. Big thing that they would do would be to provide expanded access and a conduit for the community to voice concerns or opinions about matters related to OPD. And those could be positive, those could be negative, those could just be questions, but that they would provide some sort of a conduit to the public that either exists now and expand upon it, or doesn't exist. And, and then that becomes an adjunct to what we have. To pursue explanation and examination of causes for concern, and to report such findings to the Police and Community Committee for further report to council. In other words, I don't see this, community dialogue panel being the advisory panel in the same way maybe a couple of other folks do. I see them being that they are information, collectors. They are connectors to the police department for basic questions and answers. And then if there is an issue that requires more, that they bring it back to the Police and Community Committee for the go-ahead to pursue that. And that might involve the research and documentation panel to come up with, data that would either support or provide insight to the concern, and then potentially other avenues as might be required. So that's all I need to share. So it's basically, it's like everything else I do. Rather than having one group with a whole lot of responsibilities, to have 3 groups that report to a committee where everyone is talking to one another, but each with their own specific niche of concern, so they can actually address it more successfully, and then use the resources of the other panels in this particular case, so that we're kind of informing the police and community, and then ultimately the Common Council for decisions that are more appropriately made at that level. Questions? Dave?
I'm looking at you. Hold on. Okay, I'm not muted. I'm looking at your flow chart.
Mm-hmm.
How is, explain the community members box and the CC box.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, that makes sense. Community members are in fact just community members that might be speaking with council, which would then inform potentially, agenda items for the police and community committee. CC is just a common council member that would sit in liaison. The value of this for me is that I don't want to be pitching because I won't. So let me just answer your questions.
Are we,
Go ahead, Dave.
are we critiquing right now, or just asking?
No, we're just, if you've got, questions that require answers in terms of just the basics, what
So
the hell.
how many community members are we, like outside of the community solutions
Mhm.
base, how many total committee members are we talking about in all these different
I think
groups?
you'd probably be looking at 13 to 17 outside of the panel for community solutions.
A lot of volunteers.
It is, and I again, not pitching, but I'll just say that I feel like we underestimate the hunger in the public to be involved.
Mark, the community solutions panel, and correct me if I'm wrong, seems pretty much like the enshrinement, or at least the pen on the paper to Lieutenant Witzenberg's.
Yeah, that's the intention.
Yep. Okay. Just making sure we're on the same page.
Yeah. All right, if there are no other questions, we can actually begin discussion of these things, unless there are more questions. Lynn?
I know that you put a lot of work into this, Mark, but it seems very complicated.
Yeah, well, I'm happy to explain the complications. It's typical of the organization model that I've used for the last 20 years with success. So, but it is my flow charts are always a little bit different from what people are used to seeing, but they've always worked. They do work. But I'm happy to go through all of the detail of it.
Well,
I can say, go ahead, Dave.
for one, I don't want us to overestimate the amount of work that the Citizens Advisory Board or whatever we're calling it is going to be doing. I feel that, in looking at what other committees do, and or commissions and boards do, and even ad hoc boards that we've had, we've had some really good groups that have done a lot of work and really good work. And I feel like if we put too many layers in here, we're not going to get what we want, or what we're going to get is we're going to be looking for a lot of people
Right.
to do work that it's not as much it's not as much work as we might think. I'm thinking that you could have one board, and if when they're in their discussions, they can do, if they feel that they need to do some research in looking at demographic data, they can do that outside of hearing from the public, because they may only hear from the public, I don't know, once a month. I honestly, I really don't know, but I don't see it being super high levels. I mean, we're not a big city that's getting a few hundred complaints every year. The other thing that I just want to say, and then I'll let you go, Luke, is we're trying to do multiple things here. It's not just giving people a chance to voice their opinion, but it is also the mental health side of it and trying to improve efficiencies here. So it's maybe another solution is to have the Community Solutions Board and then some type of citizens group, who the citizens group is where you don't have OPD involvement at that level, but people can feel comfortable if they have something that they want to bring up, they can go to that group. That group can also do the research that's needed. And then we have both of these groups coming and meeting with the council or the public safety committee, if that's what we decide we want to do. We'd have to have buy-in from the mayor, though, because the mayor.
I want to just jump in real quick before I let you in, Luke, if I could. Is that all right? Okay. Yeah, so I'm with you. I think, so here's my sense of this, that this is a fire burning hot right now that will not burn as hot down the road. And that right now, if we are looking to ensure that the public that's driving the whole reason that we're meeting, frankly, there's a public appetite for, if not change, and understanding of what change has already taken place. Either way, it's education, it's communication kind of stuff. If this public that's out there right now is providing an opportunity to engage in a structure that we feel comfortable about, I think it's safe to say that in a year or two, you are looking at a relatively busy community solutions panel. I think that would be the lieutenant's expectation too, that it's probably not operating at the same level it is right now. The research and documentation folks are probably 2 or 3 people. The concern that I have, just to step on my own line here for a second, about I just want to use the exact right terminology, about an advisory board, specifically being the one who's also doing the research, is that numbers can be tricky things. And that I would prefer to think we have a bipartisan, academic core of folks that are go-tos for that. And that could be that they are rarely busy, but they would at least be the people we've identified. And then as far as the advisory board, I'm calling the Police and Community Dialogue Board. I really do see that as being something that if they have to come back to, it's a conduit, which we need to the police department, especially when it's advertised. But if they feel compelled to take action and to dispense advice, that I believe there's value in a panel, a committee, a commission that has been tasked with being the ones to make that decision at a kind of a higher level. And that would keep us from having, depending on where we are on the timeline of this, folks that are a little bit more unchecked around their desire to be modifying policy and procedures, because it would have to go up a step for this, in my, what I'm calling police and community commission, whatever, that they would be the ones essentially creating that. And then frankly, if they weren't at a level of being able to make that, if that's above their pay grade, then there's the Common Council. So there's your line of report.
So,
But I don't see it as being as busy as it'll start off. Go ahead, Lynn.
Mark, I think the committee as a whole, we were looking, you assigned us, you asked us to come up with our, not a definitive proposal, just suggestions. And so I think there's little bits and pieces of each one of these proposals that we can utilize. I don't think, at least I hope you're not thinking that we're looking at one of these to select, right?
Not at all. Not at all.
So given that, I'm tending to lean towards what Dave was saying, was that if we re-involve the Public Safety Committee, that would be the Oversight Committee for the conduit of information coming up from the Community Solutions Panel, and also from the, Dave, what'd you call it? The Citizen Advisory? Something to that nature, right?
Yeah, Citizens Advisory Board is what I was calling it anyway.
So I think if we keep it to though, for me, right now, I feel comfortable in not getting the flow chart out too far, is that if we stay in those lanes right now, that we have a Citizens Advisory panel or board, along with a Community Solutions panel, and allow the two panels to report to the Public Safety Committee. That'll
I would
provide
agree.
the oversight
Sure.
needed. Because at the end of the day, they'll have the personnel director and the police chief somewhere's in there to make sure that we're staying within the civil service rules and guidelines, excuse me, and the state laws.
That sounds good.
So I guess just kind of going back, I mean, Luke came right out of the gate, something similar to that. Dave has something similar to that. And I think even mine was something similar to that.
And I think
I
Mark
don't know
had,
how you wanted to move forward with this committee tonight, because we only have 10 minutes, because we're going to just stay within the.
Let me just jump in quickly, Dave, and I'll go to you. So in terms of structure, we would be looking at essentially the Public Safety Committee, and then two subcommittees for all intents and purposes, to call them, which is the Community Solutions Panel and the Citizens Advisory Board. They would in some fashion engage as they need to, the data collection piece that they could figure out, however, and that's it.
Yeah, because I mean, I think Chris told us a few weeks ago, there was only six complaints. I think that's what he said last year. So Dave's absolutely right. This isn't hundreds of data collections. There's not going to be a lot of workload there for them. But I do think it's important that we have them, or give them at least the mission statement to engage into the public with surveys. I think that's how they got some of the information, right? They performed a survey, so that's how they found out what's going on in the community. I would like to see that portion of it introduced, or remain within that they do at least a biannual survey, so that the community has the ability to get out there and say, hey, well, that worked, but that didn't work.
That sounds right.
I agree on that. I think doing a survey, I mean, this is technicality, but like telling them to do a certain number during the year, I don't know, we may want to talk about like how often, or do we want to just say, leave it more broad? I just don't know what would work. And maybe Dave Merzig would be able to help us with that. I think it's important that we distinguish between, with a Community Solutions Panel and the Advisory Board, if one is going to be, or both of them are going to be something that's actually ingrained in the charter. And I don't have the answer that whether we can or not. I think that the Advisory Board is something that would follow more like our traditional boards and commissions, though. The panel seems a little bit different. I'm not sure what category that would fall into, and if we could treat it the same or not. But again, that could be something that we talk with Dave Merzig about, what he would recommend.
So what are we looking at in terms of reports and communications? We'd be looking at certainly reports that the Public Safety Committee would be making to Common Council once a month, I would imagine.
Well, I was thinking the Public Safety Committee, that is was traditionally the entire council. I mean, another reason why we got rid of it was because we had a city manager, and so the theory was that both chiefs would be discussing everything ahead of time with the manager, and the manager would then report at the council meeting. But structure has changed. But that would include the entire council. Whether we have this a public safety committee within the council meeting again, like we used to, or have a completely separate meeting, is to be determined. We could decide later what we all want to do. But yeah, but we would have representatives from both those groups in theory meeting with us like once a month. And it may be that there isn't anything, but we can incorporate other things in that meeting. We could go back to having the police chief and the fire chief giving their monthly report to us during that time.
So to just encapsulate what you're saying again, so Public Safety Committee could very well be that could take the entire council's time at a monthly meeting. You'd have the Community Solutions Panel representative along with the Citizen Advisory Board being represented and making a report at that same Public Safety Committee meeting. Does that sound right? Is that what you're saying?
That's what I was saying. Yep. And if it turns out there's a bigger issue with the advisory board, with whatever they're reporting, we can decide at that point as a council, or the future councils can decide what they want to do with that piece of information. If they want to go into exec session, or if they want to push that off to a specific committee, council committee for further discussion, or to solve whatever issue it is, they can decide then. Okay. I think if we try to solve that piece and that avenue here, I think we could be talking about this forever.
Right. So then that answers, I think, my next question is the fail-safe, essentially. If this is, once this is institutionalized, of an advisory panel not becoming, something that keeps the police department from getting their work done. I've experienced that with folks that have, been in an advisory role, and everything slows down as you're trying to accommodate them. So this would be something that they would be at the direction of council, by way of the Public Safety Committee meeting. They would then be told, okay, pursue, whatever it is that they determined that they'd like to do. Right?
Yeah, so information could go both ways between the Community Solutions Board and the council, or more likely it would be the chief and the council, and then the Citizens Advisory Board and the council. Information could flow both ways.
Okay, but in terms of, again, keeping the advisory board, making certain that you're getting the maximum value of the advisory board in terms of its being a conduit, which I think is important for information and for concerns to be expressed to the OPD and back. But in terms of them taking action, you'd be looking at that being something that would have to be determined at the public safety meeting.
Well, they're taking action on the complaints, Mark.
Right.
So
well,
again,
yes, are they? That's the question, I guess. Are they going to go and?
I think that would go. I think that information would go with the city administrator, okay, and council in exec session. If it turns out that there's any action to be taken, that's a whole other discussion.
Right.
This advisory board has it can't have any legal authority, or if we decide to go that way where we're trying to give it legal authority, that's a whole other discussion.
I think Mark was talking about, Dave, I think Mark was talking about action. Like what were they doing? What's their call action?
Right. Oh, you mean their actual duties?
Right. Yeah. What are they actually doing?
Exactly right.
Yeah, I don't think he was describing a legal term.
Oh, okay, sorry.
No, but I am concerned about when folks are in this, they have a sense that they need to do a level of investigation because something warrants that. That can be certainly be disruptive. At the very least, I feel like something like that needs to be directed at a higher level.
So
Yes, go ahead.
I guess the first point is, and Luke, I really want you to chime in on this, is that how does the actual complaint or concern get to this advisory board or panel? Because throughout the entire CAB report, they've wanted transparency. So if we take the police department out of it and allow them to have a direct conduit, they being the community, to the advisory board, isn't that the most direct way?
Dave, go ahead, Luke. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. I would, you know, if I think if we set this up in a way that, you know, keeping in mind the HR side of it and respecting what we have to respect due to union contracts, I think that including the advisory board in the complaint, whatever way that goes, if it's through not Nixle, if it's through this oh my, get my tongue.
The FBI site.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, but remember, when I was going through the survey, a lot of times the folks didn't know who the officer was. They just kind of, they gave a general reference. And so you're right, that's where HR and the police chief will come in. But at least the initial call to action is that they gather all the information from the complaint or the concern and start the process. Say, hey, we've got one. I mean, again, we're only looking at maybe 6. Hopefully in the future, they'll have none. But right now they're only doing 6. So.
Dave.
I was looking at that as any complaint that's filed, because right now the complaints are filtered through the police department. Any complaint that goes through there will then get filtered to HR and then sent back to
Yes.
the committee, the advisory board for the discussion. Whether or not anything's got to be redacted out of the report, you know, that's not anything I'm an expert on. So I would leave that to Katie and the lieutenant to decide, and Dave Merzick to come up with. But that way, that at least filters the conversation, and then there'll be further conversation eventually, I'm sure, at the council level.
But I thought that was the problem, Dave, was the filtering, that the citizens were concerned about the filtering. So
what do you mean? I'm not following you.
I thought that a lot of the posts that had a complaint against the police department, they were concerned about retaliation, 1, and 2, they were concerned about putting their name to it because of the retaliation portion of it. So they were concerned whether the report actually went through the process. So I was trying to figure out a way of going directly to this new panel.
Well, we can change where the only way to do that would be changing where the complaints are submitted then.
Right.
And
That was my point. That was my point, is that I'm looking at this advisory board being able to set up a very public and well advertised conduit through which complaints or you know, kudos.
There's a simpler way, I think. We're getting our new website is almost done.
Right.
It's very possible we could just have a link to filling out that same form and it be given to Katie and have Katie.
In which case, then it really just becomes a promotional concern for the CAB, that they wind up becoming promoters of that link. Yeah, that could be as well.
Right, and that's
what you're saying is it goes to HR, correct?
Yeah.
Dave's complaint goes to HR and then is funneled from HR to the Public Safety Committee. Was that the?
Yeah, that's why I was suggesting from our new city website that we could have that ability. So yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then it's really a question of the CAB having, they in some fashion need to be kind of installed in that process where there is some level of shared transparency there in the beginning of the process, because I think Len's point is a good one. I think it was brought up maybe a couple of different times, that this is a case of the public feeling like their information is being passed along to the parties who are going to pay best attention to it and act upon it, and that there isn't any recourse that they're going to be dealing with.
Correct.
All right. So as I understand it, thank you very much. I see both Daniel and Dave Mertzig have joined us. We'll be with both you guys, I would say, within 10 minutes. Thank you for your patience. So as I look at it at this point, we are looking essentially at a triangle. At the top of that triangle is the Public Safety Committee reinstituted in some form to be determined. We have the Community Solutions Panel, and we have the Citizens Advisory Board that kind of are reporting to and also are provided resource and support from this Public Safety Committee. They are going to send representatives on a monthly basis to a meeting that happens within council. If there are, within the context of the police, the Community Advisory Board, they would be looking at doing these things like regular surveys, but potentially biannual, but regular surveys. They'd be determining people with whom to work, that people would feel that numbers are not going to be funny. They would also be at the very least promoting and maybe in some fashion engaged in the front end of the reporting process through the website, the new Oneonta City website, where any complaints certainly would then most likely funnel through HR and then get kicked back up to public safety. Does that more or less describe it? And the actions that might be investigative or in some fashion disruptive, potentially, that might be taken by the police, by the Citizen Advisory Board, that would be given a green light or a red light at the public safety level.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
In other words,
Well, I
we
guess it
found-
depends on the situation. There's just too many situations to identify to. But if a particular officer needs disciplinary action, that's going to be a
right to Katie.
route.
Right.
Public safety isn't going to, that public safety committee isn't going to handle that.
Right. That makes sense too. That's right. So depending on the scenario, it could be a disciplinary issue. Right. So
Could be
we're gonna.
policy to go back to legislative
Mhm.
committee.
That's right. So, there's wiggle room that's going to be built, that's already built within the system, and it just needs to be applied. But in general, I think, the consensus, for me, it's about report, it's about communication between parties. For me, especially because I work with numbers, I know how you can change a number to look any way you want. I think it's important to me that there are folks that are identified that are a good resource for the generation of facts and figures that are going to wind up informing decisions. But outside of that, it's communication, it's report, and it's basically the direction that then comes from the Public Safety Committee as to what the next piece might be. Especially, given the context of Common Council where those meetings will take place. So it's a pretty clean triangle.
Yeah.
Luke, are you seeing it the same way?
I think so. I think so.
It's a lot. It's a lot.
It's a lot. No, I think it's important that the Community Advisory Board, the CAB, the citizen part of it reports directly to council through that mechanism. I think that's important. Yes, and I'm sorry, I'm still analyzing the whole thing, but that side of it sounds good.
Mhm.
Being able to report that particular, as opposed to kind of funneling it through up and up and up,
All right.
directly to the council at that meeting.
All right, so here's my suggestion, guys, is that we have begun to land on a structure. You okay, Luke?
I'm sorry, I meant to hit mute. I'm sorry.
No, you're right. Anyway, we've landed on a structure. And what I'm going to ask is that we do something similar to what we just did. That maybe is we kind of brainstorm, wordsmith, determine, some of the things that need to get tightened up in structure over the course of the next week, and then look at that structure as we begin our next meeting as the first order of business. And we'll talk about it, but let's not work independently so much. We'll maybe compare notes and compare ideas so that we can have something that will work. We'll pass Dave Mertzig's legal scrutiny, among others. Does that sound like a deal? Dave, Len, Luke?
I think so.
Yeah, it's fine.
All right, good. All right, so then again, Daniel and David Mertzig, I appreciate very much your patience. We're already 7 minutes into the 5 o'clock hour. It's a lot we're trying to get done. The good news is we're making progress. So Daniel, let me explain what we're doing. I'm not certain what Luke, I'm sure he told you exactly, but let me just reiterate it if you don't mind. There were a number of recommendations, as you know, that were included in the CAB in the report. We've been going through them one by one, trying very, very hard to adhere to the spirit and intent of the individual recommendations. In certain cases, either contractual or legal issues presented themselves. We've worked through those, and for the most part, minus one, we found ourselves in unanimity on moving those things forward with some wordsmithing. There is one, however, which actually leads off the CAB report, which is 1A, which for the purposes of the folks who are listening, 1A is transparency and reporting and gathering of information. And I'm going to read this. While the board is not aware of any data that OPD shares from third parties, Amazon, Ring cameras, etc., in the interest of transparency, we recommend that the Common Council advise OPD to develop a procedure to assure that the information gathered was not through third parties. Now, we weren't able to come up with a unanimous consensus, Daniel, on this question. And what we've asked is that a representative of both sides of the opinion make themselves present and provide us with 3 minutes of an overview of their position, and take 2 minutes in rebuttal to what you might have heard then presented from the other side of it. Dave Mertzig is the city attorney and a sweet man to allow us to do this to him. It's not that he is a proponent or not for the side of the issue that he is going to argue. It's that we need to have someone argue the other side of the issue. And so we thank Dave Mertzig very much for doing his legal duty here. Thank you for that. And Daniel, we're going to let you take over. Again, I'm going to be a jerk about it. It's 5:10 and about 5:13, 5:14, a little bit before that, I'll give you a little signal that you need to wrap that up, and we'll let Dave Mertzig counter. Okay? So with that, again, in address of that recommendation, the floor is yours, Daniel.
Thanks, Mark. Yeah, I very much appreciate the opportunity to speak here. I think you all sort of know who I am from from Luke inviting me in, but I'll introduce myself. I'm Daniel Dreyer. I'm an Oneonta resident. I live over on Walnut Street in Ward 8. And I worked on the CAB subcommittee with Luke, and I was the person who originally proposed. The final language isn't the one I had used, but I had proposed that recommendation. So I'm happy to be the one to speak to it. And my background, my domain knowledge on this is that I've worked in the software industry since 2001. And so I have quite a bit of domain knowledge on how video surveillance systems and other technical infrastructure work at a technical level, and can speculate a bit to the privacy implications of that based on my professional experience. So to summarize what is being discussed here is primarily Amazon Ring, which is the largest and most successful of these video connected surveillance systems. Ring in particular looks like a doorbell and functions much like a doorbell, but it's an internet connected video camera that continuously records and sends footage to Amazon's computer systems in the cloud. That footage is subject to facial recognition and sort of other analysis. There are other technological advancements that they're planning to roll out that I think will complicate this in the coming years. This is very widely used. So 1 in 10 police departments in the United States have partnerships with Amazon Ring and can access footage without a warrant. And some of them are quite near. So Utica City Police Department, Oneida County Sheriff's Department, Montgomery County Sheriff's Department, Saratoga County Sheriff's Department have signed such partnership agreements. So this is happening. And when they sign those, they get access to a website that allows them to access these videos without a warrant. And I'm not saying that this is actively illegal, but I think it's wrong. I don't think that we want that in our community. And there are quite a few large organizations who have who share this view. So there's an Amazon engineer who worked on Ring who is outspoken about this. There's an organization called Color of Change, the Electronic Frontier Foundation, who is a digital privacy activism organization. Even Judge Napolitano in 2019 did a piece on Fox encouraging local municipalities to require police departments to have to use search warrants. And there are a number of cities that have passed ordinances with requirements of this nature. I don't think that this should be a particularly controversial request, because when I spoke with Acting Chief Witzenberg, he agreed that he felt strongly that all video evidence should be collected using a warrant, and that he was concerned that it wouldn't hold up in court if it was otherwise. And that's the practice OPD. He didn't feel that a constraint of this nature would put any limitations at all on OPD's ability to operate. So the request here is basically to codify that in law so that that practice that we have now that is working for us now is sort of enshrined in law, and we continue that way forward with awareness that as evidence is needed, it can be gotten via warrants or subpoenas or whatever. But the request is that there must be court oversight, and that OPD not be allowed to go and sign one of these agreements unilaterally with Amazon or similar companies to allow them to access footage of this nature or request it directly without warrants.
Great, that's terrific. Thank you very much. And David Mertzik, if you've got, you get the time, it's all yours.
Sure. First, I think it should be understood by everybody that the chief has no authority to enter into a unilateral agreement with anybody to do anything. He is not an independent agent. He acts at the behest of the mayor and the common council. And there's a provision in our charter that says that no public official can enter into a contract or an agreement of any kind for services without the approval of the common council first. So if such an agreement were done illegally, then then the chief would run into problems of his own. But secondly, it would have to be done first with the consent of the common council. The other thing is that when you're in public, there is no expectation of privacy. When you're walking down the street, people can take pictures of you. You can take pictures of them. If the police are acting inappropriately, people with iPhones can turn on their iPhones and photograph the activity of the police, and they can send it to whomever they want, including the press or anyone else. We already have cameras observing people all over Main Street and on Water Street. And in fact, those things are admissible. If an individual puts the Ring button on their front door, they're doing it for their own protection and for concern about their own protection. And if that was accessed upon agreement, or if what was going on across the street was accessed upon agreement by the person who generated it, it's no different than if someone was standing on their porch taking a photograph with their iPhone. I don't think that either Dan or the CAB would suggest that we ban iPhones or taking of photographs on the street because there are unnecessary intrusions into other people's lives. The Supreme Court has said over and over and over again that in the public, you're free to take whatever pictures you want. You can't take pictures using a zoom lens to go inside somebody else's house but you can if they're across the street. That's what you see through a Zoom camera or through a Ring camera. So the concern is that it can be a slippery slope. If you say, oh, well, we're going to bar the OPD from getting information from a Ring deal with Amazon, are we also going to bar them from placing any cameras anywhere in the city, on Main Street, on Water Street? Are we going to tell them that no one could take photographs of anyone, that anything that's generated by iPhone by a citizen who's taking pictures of bad acting by any city employee should be barred from being provided to the police or considered by the police? Obviously, it's a slippery slope. And I think that under those circumstances, since we can't enter into an agreement, the chief cannot enter into an agreement with Amazon or anyone else without the consent of the Common Council, I think this is not a problem that should be addressed here.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Dan, if you want to take a couple of minutes from rebuttal.
Yeah, thank you. So I appreciate that, and it's good to know that the OPD can't enter into such an agreement autonomously. I think we're talking about somewhat different things here. So you're talking about a slippery slope and banning people from taking pictures via iPhones and that kind of thing. That's obvious. That's not what the subcommittee recommended. There's a difference between people taking pictures and sharing them with the police and the creation of an automated surveillance dragnet that creates autonomously a database of people's locations over time and their movement over time. There's a real material difference between a static picture of someone, which is what you're describing, and a searchable database of where people have been over time. There's, I think, you're pointing out what is already legal. This is, of course, it's lawful to take pictures of people. Of course, it's lawful to share photographs with the police. No one is, I'm not talking about that. What I'm asking about is, as a community, do we want to live in this dystopian world where there's this database of video surveillance footage that is indexed using facial recognition, over which there are no judicial constraints on police searching it? That is what the CAB recommendation is about. This is sort of the kind of thing you would expect out of like the Stasi in East Germany. This is dystopian. This isn't how our community should operate. And it may well be legal to do this. I believe it is legal right now to operate that. And that's why we brought it forth, that we are asking for a proactive prevention of the creation of this dystopian future in this community. I'm not trying to assert that this is already, like you're saying, yes, this is legal. I'm saying, yes, I agree. That's the problem. That's why we need to proactively do something about this, because that's a messed up way to live. I don't think we should all be cataloged like that. Thank you for the chance at a rebuttal.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And David, if you want to take the last.
Yeah, I just in response to that, what's happening now is that the ring mechanism, like so many other surveillance mechanisms. So like every time you look at a YouTube, you're being tracked by Google. Every time you sign in to the internet and do a search or visit a website, Google is learning more and more about you. It's simply making it easier, because when our police do a stakeout now, they will knock on the door of a nearby person, and if there's cooperation, they'll go up to a second floor and they'll set up their cameras and they'll observe people coming and going on a regular basis, and keep a database of the people who are coming and going at a particular house, and note who drives up and take the license plates down to the people who come up. It's a standard procedure for investigating crime. And in my experience, the police are not voyeuristic to such an extent that they want to get onto an Amazon database and spend time watching other people coming in and out of their houses without motivation. It's simply a tool, and again, it's a tool that we think that the police ought to have made available to them, again, of things in public. All these activities are in public, and they're the same as the sweet neighbor peeking out the window every time you drive in the driveway. It's just an information gathering mechanism, and I understand the concern, but is that my ding? Am I 2 minutes up?
You're 2 minutes up. Thank you.
Oh, okay.
Thank you very much, David. Daniel, and obviously, and David, I'm going to, first of all, thank you so much for presenting both sides of that, and as well as you did. The committee is going to have discussion around this. We may circle back for additional opinion or information, or we may not. Just to be clear, but we're going to have discussion about this. And as to the committee, what we had agreed earlier on was that if we weren't in unanimous consent on any recommendation, we would do exactly as we've just done. However, now having heard both sides of the issue, it will be, majority will rule the day here. And so that said, we'll start our discussion. Does anybody have anything they want to start with? Dave?
Okay, I only have 2 points to make. First, that as far as we already said, as far as entering into any agreement with Ring Doorbell, it wouldn't be OPD that would be doing that. That would be the Common Council. There was also an article in the Washington Post, which, yes, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, who owns Amazon. But this was regarding the stories that we're talking about. And I'm just going to read 2 short paragraphs here. The doorbell company, camera company Ring, has forged video sharing partnerships with more than 400 police forces across the US. And this is 2 years ago, so I'm sure it's a lot more, granting them potential access to homeowners' camera footage and a powerful role in what the company calls the nation's, quote, new neighborhood watch. The partnerships let police request the video recorded by homeowners' cameras within a specific time and area, helping officers see footage from the company's millions of internet-connected cameras installed nationwide, the company said. Officers don't receive ongoing or live video access, and homeowners can decline their requests. So I think this tells me that, yes, the police have to make the request within a specific time and area of the footage that they're looking for, but homeowners can decline to give that. So there's that power is still in the homeowner's hands. So in my ward, I've already known at least one case where having a Ring doorbell actually helped solve a crime of things taken from somebody's porch. And I really would hesitate to, looking at what we have in place right now, I would hesitate to want to remove that tool. Looking at the fact that it's not just given automatically to the police, but I would rather, I would be hesitant to completely remove that tool from OPD's toolbox for solving crimes.
Luke?
Yeah, I think, you know, I don't think the issue so much is the Ring doorbell. I think it's more the database going into it. If somebody, for example, it has something taken from their porch and gives the footage themselves, that's different than having a database and going into there that's being automatically uploaded. I think Daniel makes a very good point. As does David Merzig. But I do think this is a slippery slope, and I do think, especially with how unreliable technologies such as facial recognition, the racial bias that facial recognition has shown towards particularly persons of color. I just don't know if this is something that we should be looking at without a warrant. I mean, if the police feel this is something they need for their investigation, if they want to apply for a warrant, if the judge thinks it's necessary, by all means. But having this open, particularly at this state in technological advance, and how fallible some of these technologies can be, I'm a little nervous about it.
Len, anything?
All right, now, Mark, why don't you go ahead?
Okay. All right. Well, so I'm curious, and I'm actually going to ask Chris, Lieutenant Witzenberg is likely to have the answer. I don't. Just how quickly, how easily one might be able to have a warrant applied to a need to check doorbells, videos, et cetera, in an area. Is it something that is a complication in a short need, time frame, or is it something that's relatively easy to put your hands on? How difficult is the process?
I guess it all depends on what it is that we're looking to use the information for, whether or not the person that is the subscriber for the doorbell camera is willing to give us consent at that point, written consent to obtain the video. Or if we have to get a search warrant, and that depends on the availability of somebody to write the search warrant and the judge to sign it. So it could be anywhere from just a couple of minutes to several hours, or even a couple of days. But it's all, I don't even know how we would apply using facial recognition technology in that realm, and I'm not comfortable with facial recognition technology in its current state anyway. There's a host of literature on how unreliable it is, but that's not, we wouldn't be using it as a database for facial recognition. It would be for somebody that was described, and we would use it for like the overall description of the person to develop cause over whatever it would happen to be. It wouldn't necessarily just be a face. It would be, height, weight, clothing. There's a lot of other factors that go into that also.
Thank you very much, Chief. So my concern, Daniel, I so feel you. I in another life, I run a business that is super aware of data mining. And it's just everywhere. It's just everywhere. And we can do what we want to in the city of Oneonta, and the corporate giants whose charge it is to advance these technologies, they may laugh, or we may not even be worthy of a laugh. There's that. I get it. I really do get it. On the other hand, I have a child that goes missing, or God forbid, we find ourselves with a scenario where someone is engaged in some sort of a terroristic activity, and we need to know when's the last time somebody saw that person. There are a host of reasons that having that lack of privacy sometimes is something that we all, I think, at varying times go, oh, thank God we at least know. And then we go back to the, oh my God, I can't believe they're looking at everything I'm doing. There's that. There's lastly the piece that the Oneonta police cannot sign any kind of a hidden agreement that will allow them to do this, that, or such and such without being in violation of the city's dictate that everything runs through council. So some of that concern is already mitigated by the process that we already have in place. The reality of it is I hate the idea of information gathering and data mining. I absolutely hate it. I don't see where, without getting into a highly filtered process of you can have this and you can't have that, if that even would hold legal water, that we'd be able to advance this at all. I feel like I feel it, Daniel. I really do. It pains me to know that if I go look at something on Facebook, I'm going to get an ad about it, a minute later on some other platform. I get it. I don't see how this is something that I would be comfortable advancing though, and I'm sorry about that. Len, anything at this point?
No, I agree. I think Dave really prioritized and clarified it for myself is that there's no way to enter into a data mining or data collection platform for the Oneonta Police Department, because in order for that to happen, they would have to sign a document. And then I thought David also read where even if we signed that document, they still wouldn't be able to collect it because it was on I thought you said an individual basis. It's not ongoing. So they're not sucking that data in at all times. So that would eliminate Daniel's concerns in having a dragnet, continual dragnet within the city limits. So for me, it sounds that the Oneonta Police Department is doing it on a singular basis, which that's important that if a crime or an incident had happened, that they have to go to the homeowner has to give the permission first. If they don't, and the police feel that it's strong enough, then they can go get a warrant to obtain the information. So it seems as though the Oneonta Police Department is following the legal procedures in place right now.
Look,
After hearing what both David and Daniel said, I continue to support this recommendation. I think, like you said, Mark, if Amazon decides they want to do this, Oneonta is not going to be the one getting in the way. However, we do have the power, and particularly this position in this moment, to take a stand and say this is something our community just is uncomfortable with. And we have members of the community that have expressed as such. So I am voting to keep that in there.
can I suggest, as we have with some other recommendations, that we turn it around a little bit and look at what we appreciate as being the process, and that we, as a council, what we'd be recommending is that council would say, that's the course, no deviation, this is the process, and that's it. That's our expectation.
So
I'm
Mark,
not exactly following you on.
yeah,
I'm saying so the process is homeowners currently have the right and will have the right to determine whether or not they want to share video, third-party video, period. The Oneonta Police have the tools to be able, in the case of needing, as they determine they do, video footage to obtain a warrant. And that's the process, and that's an appropriate process. In the case of city supplied, for instance, the cameras on Water Street, that is part of the OPD. And Lieutenant, you correct me if I'm wrong, but that's part of your toolkit essentially. You're not looking for warrants or access, permissions. Those are your cameras, and what you see on those cameras is that's your material to work with. But in the case of third party, the rights of the citizenry are to refuse to provide permission for access by the Oneonta Police, or for anybody else for that matter, to their technology, to what was recorded. In the case that the Oneonta Police Department feels compelled that they need to have that, they can get a warrant. That no contracts shall ever be signed with any third parties without specific permission of the Common Council. Again, this is already in place, but we maybe memorialize it.
I think it's a good start, Mark. I think it's good to let the community know that we're putting safeguards to ensure this doesn't happen, even if whether it can or can't. Again, it's important for the community to know. I think this sounds better.
And I hate to say it, but it's 2021 right now, and this is all going to seem quaint in 10 years.
We'll evolve with it too, Mark.
Yeah, I know. It is what it is.
Well, we're not putting in safeguards. These are safeguards that already exist.
Right, but we've done it with the other recommendations. We've said the council suggests that OPD continues its policy of, fill in the blank. There have been several things where the chief has said, oh, but we're doing that. And so we've said, good. And we appreciate that, and we've memorialized that in recommendations. And I think that this is an opportunity to do the same.
But we still have to vote on the recommendation that's in front of us.
Or, yes, okay. We can either vote to just remove it, or we can, as we have, I think, once or twice in other places, provide something that provides the intent and can be included.
I would be in support of that, Mark. If we're just going to vote right now, I'm going to keep my vote as is. But if we're open to amending it, I'd be willing to do that.
Dave, Len? I'm inclined to amend it to make it a more proactive relative to the current policies. Proactive is not the right word, but that we are reiterating, maybe for some people's first time edification, that this is the policy, and council supports the continuation of that policy.
I believe we probably could wordsmith this recommendation to recognizing that the police chief cannot enter into any data collection contract with a third-party agency without approval of the common council.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And do we reference for the purposes of maybe even just providing the educational component for the community that ever reads this, that processes in place, which include the citizens' First Amendment rights? Is it First Amendment rights?
I think David is over there cranking out.
Not First Amendment, is it, Dave?
Well, the Fourth Amendment search and seizure is probably what you're talking about.
One of them amendments.
Freedom of speech.
Fourth Amendment right, to privacy.
I'm here for you.
That was it. That was basically find me my amendment. Anyway, Fourth Amendment right to privacy, that we recognize that, and that the police. We also recognize that the police, in cases that of their determination, are welcome to request a warrant, go through go through the process for warrants.
I would support that, Mark.
It's terrible. I mean, somebody else is writing, I think. No, I don't see any other pens moving. But I think that's essentially what we're saying is keep on doing what you're doing. And if you think you want to do something else, well, you can't. And the fact that Daniel is nodding his head gives me some hope that this might be okay.
Yeah, I think so. I think so too.
Dave Risberger.
So what's the motion? Like, I don't want to vote on a motion that I don't know exactly what I'm voting
Right.
on.
Okay. So I can.
I'll work on it too, Mark. I'm right
Would you?
right now.
That'd be a help. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had a guest on my lap. I couldn't type, but she's
I
not
saw
on.
that. Yeah. So the first part of that motion, I'll let you take the second part if you don't mind, about the warrants and
Sure.
the Fourth Amendment, rights.
Sure.
Anyway, the first part of that motion would be that council that we recommend to council that, what are we saying?
We acknowledge that OPD cannot enter into any.
Right. Thank you. I absolutely lost the thread there.
council
Yes.
involvement.
Thank you. This is all just me trying not to write anything. So Dave's got the first sentence, and Luke, you've got the last two,
I believe so.
or last one. I really am the laziest guy in this Hollywood Squares here. You got that first sentence there, Dave Risberger?
Yeah, I already wrote it down.
Okay, great. So, and Luke has got that second, and you all just about done with that, Luke?
I think so. Yeah, I'm just yes.
All right. And Len, do we still have you?
I'm here, but I apologize. I have lower back pain.
Yeah, no worries. We got you. That's the main thing. All right. So, Dave, you want to read the, and then Luke,
Sure.
piggyback?
Sure.
Motion.
Okay, so while this board is not aware of any data that OPD gathered from third parties, in the interest of transparency, we acknowledge OPD cannot enter into any third-party agreement without common council involvement. I'm wondering if I need something else there. Third-party agreement.
That's what I have. That's what I have exactly there, and then I have a follow up to that, Dave, in a couple sentences.
Okay.
So picking up right up after where Dave read off, I said, this is ensuring that Oneonta citizens' Fourth Amendment rights are respected. If OPD finds that this information is necessary and is denied, they are able to apply for a search warrant to obtain this information.
Okay, that works. That works for me. So I'd move that.
Can we get the acting police chief to chime in on that one, please?
Yeah, sure. Lieutenant?
That's what we do now.
Yeah, that's what we were saying, yeah.
So, and I have no intent of using facial recognition technology unless it's proven to be effective, and it just hasn't been. So, I mean, the accuracy of a photo to be used for facial recognition and tracking is so far beyond, I think, what most Ring doorbell cameras can provide anyway. It's useless. So, this is stuff that we get scrutinized for, and if I present something to court, and it's not legitimate, and we haven't done our due diligence in doing the investigation, then we look bad. So that's not something that I have any intention of doing.
All right, very good. Thank you, Chief. All right, so
thank you, Dave, for putting that together.
you seconded that, Len, just now?
Yes, I will second Dave Risberger's motion.
All right, any further discussion? Dave, go ahead.
Luke, can you just read your very last sentence off one more time?
Sure. If OPD feels that this information is necessary and is denied from that citizen, they are able to apply for a warrant to receive this information.
Okay, thanks.
All right.
Again, I will second the motion in its entirety now.
All righty. And then if there's no further discussion, is there? I would say no. Then all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay.
Aye.
Aye, so that's unanimous. So we actually have a track record right now of being unanimous across the board on everything. We have 3 additional pieces that are going to have to wait until next week. All right. Those are in letter D, as I mentioned in our in the agenda. It's A, B, and D. It's in rather 4, civilian oversight and community involvement. That's going to be informed to a great degree by the structure of this piece that we have promised that we'll kind of work on between meetings, right? And with that, were you waving to me, Luke?
No, just when you're done, I'll say something quick.
All right. So with that, I think outside of whatever Luke's got for us, I think we're probably done with our meeting today. Go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, just to confirm, Mark, I wrote up the language, sent it out to everybody, our clerks, and everyone on the commission. Also would like to take a moment to thank Dave Merzick for the arguing the other side, as well as Daniel for coming in and talking to us. Really appreciate both of you doing this. Thank you.
Sure do it. I think we all echo that. So I guess I'll see many people in an hour and 13 minutes. Daniel, again, thank you so much. And I'm going to bid all adios. We'll talk across these next several days, committee members, about our structure of that proposal number 5. Okay.
Thanks,
Right,
everyone.
Thanks.
Take care.